manufacturers over there. You look at their brochure and then you look at someone else's and you think, well, isn't that their product? You're sort of wondering whose it is. And they're all copying each other or doing a tweak of what someone else has done. Mm-hmm. So in a way, being in Australia, you're a bit immune from that type of thing, and we tend to come up with our own ways of doing things, and it turns out to, in this case, it turned out to be different. So that was the catalyst of how we started, and then things just sort of moved on from there.
And so how many did you sell? Or you...
we probably sold...
and obviously someone's copied your idea by now?
No. So we still sell our ring. We don't sell it in the States anymore because the Porter was the company in the States that had the licensing agreement. They ended up going into liquidation. Not into liquidation. They went into bad times during the financial crisis, and they were then bought out. Okay. So, but no, I think they paid us a quarterly amount, which gave us probably might have been 3,000 or 4,000 a quarter. Yep. It was just a nice story, and actually when I went to
confidence too, yeah.
Oh, and just a great...
And you're still working in Austria. You're still
that's
there.
Right.
You know.
Great.
But
but just the actual journey that came of that was great because at the time that the agreement was, we sort of agreed on what to do. They flew me over there, and they had a stretch limo at the airport waiting for me. Took me to a hotel in Chicago. Had a stretch limo at the hotel to pick me up in the morning to take me to their factory. Gave me a factory tour, and when we sat down at the desk and signed the papers, they said, look, we're a bit worried here that you were going to pull out of this or weren't going to do it. And as soon as I'd signed it, the guy reached underneath the desk and he pulled out 3 brochures that they'd had printed up a month or so back with our ring and everything in it, ready to distribute. So they,
Oh, serious. So, okay. And
so one of the biggest benefits to me was not actually selling the ring to them, was actually having a tour through their factory. And they were a $40 million company at the time, 150 employees. Wow. And I saw all the steps in manufacturing on how their setup was, and it just sort of blew me away, the sheer volume that they do. I mean, they employed 2 guys full-time taking glass backboards out of crates and mounting them on frames. Right. That's all they did.
Right.
And
300 million people. Yeah, we Aussies, we can't understand that, can we?
No.
If we're trying to sell a few things to a few thousand people here on the Gold Coast.
Yeah. Yeah, it's our biggest bugbear here, because when we do a production of rings, we make 8 at a time, and that's because of the amount of coils we get out of a length of bar. So if we need more, we do another batch of 8. So we always do a set quantity. But when you do that quantity, you have trouble spending the time and the money to do a decent setup so that you can reduce your production time. Right. So we try and do our setup according to lean manufacturing processes, but because our guys might do basketball rings in the morning, then they're making hockey goals in the afternoon, and then working on AFL goals later on in the day. So to actually work on a lot of different products, our guys are more skilled than the guys in the States, because the guys in the States they're just doing one thing. And there's one guy over there that all he does day in, day out is put hooks on basketball rings.
Right.
So,
yeah. I'm just thinking about my years in the factory of just doing those, just cutting steel. Like, months go by where you're just doing that one job.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So probably the as I said, I went through the factory, so that always stuck in my mind, and in a way showed me what we could become in time. Whether we've got the capability to do it or not is another picture, but another story. But it just gave you an idea on what could be. And after that, they showed me through the factory. Went out and had tea with the CEO. Then they took me to United Centre, which they'd just built in Chicago, and saw the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Luke Longley from Australia, and that was an absolute buzz. That was knocked me over.
What a feeling! What an instant! Can you believe I'm? I'm
thinking it's only me, guys. Don't worry about all the fuss. It's only me. So so it's just been a good story and a good journey. So
right. So your when you were a basketballer, did you take it seriously? Were you, was it fun, or were you in it? Like, I haven't looked up your history. Were you in competition basketball?
No, I went into veterans, so you've got to be 30 plus to be in it. So,
but I'm talking high school and after that. When you were interested.
Well, I was always competitive. I wanted to always trying all the time. It wasn't it wasn't slack on the court so it was more. I was competitive all the time. So, and then I ended up coming up to Gold Coast in 1998 and played up in Carrara I finished a year ago. So we've been playing up there in the Veterans Comp for a long time.
I can't help but think, when I was 35, I was already thinking it's sort of probably a rough time for a lot of 35-year-olds because your 20s are gone and you're like, what now? And then bang, here you are in Chicago watching the Bulls. Where did all this come from? Were you feeling that way before, like at Osram, I'll bet, going, there's got to be more to this than this. We're doing,
Osram was a desk job. I was the product manager for entertainment lighting, which is the lamps for discos and the picture theatres and all that type of thing. So, and I knew 9 to 5 office was never me. Wasn't my gig. So I was more of I'm more of a creative person than a technical person. And at the time we started, my wife and I started to do photojournalism. So we'd actually written a few stories, taken the pictures, because I'm a photographer by trade. And so photography being my passion, I was sort of working, how can I actually get a living out of what I'm doing? So, so we ended up getting published in Qantas in-flight magazine and Singapore Airlines, Malaysian magazine. So we were heading towards, in our holidays, doing road trips and doing stories. And we did one on Bega cheese and then trout harvesting and different topics. And then the ring came along, so that sort of
very cool.
Threw the spanner in. That's good. In their plans. So
that's good. Well, you know what? The way I see it, it's like I said before. Someone said to me once, and it makes no sense to anyone else but me. I think if you do more, you'll be doing more. So that someone says, "Hey," I always use surfing because I think I read it in a surfing magazine. What have you been up to? Oh, I've been doing a lot of surfing. There's when you get those times in your life when you get stuck on the couch and you're watching too much TV or you're just stuck.
Yep.
Well, if you do more of that photo stuff that you love, you just then bang, something else is created because other people are looking at you in this favourable light. Like here's a guy with his wife that's doing something, and then you're letting off this positivity. I think that's how it works for a lot of people.
It's sort of. I think when you're more active, when you're off the couch, you can. Doing something drives you to want to do more. It does for me anyway. So, every time I come to work, I see something that I want to get fixed up or improve or do better. I generally don't actually see where I'm at. I'm always thinking that it's got to go an extra yard. I want it to be a bit better. I want to come here next week and that's fixed up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, so it's just a case of keep at it. Okay. Not everything works, but if you just keep paddling.
Can I ask you, because I watched my father, he became very successful from nothing, through being a Boilermaker, through learning about selling. He was a commissioned salesman selling stereos.
Oh, yes.
Way back in the 80s, and he learned. Okay, he was finally out of the factory welding. And then a job came along where it was a shed company, where it was commission sales and a factory. It lined up perfectly for him.
Right.
He goes, okay, now we just need to sell all this stuff, and the factory goes. He could manage both things in his mind because he'd done both.
Well, that's pretty unusual, because you'd normally get a factory worker or welder who's using one side of their brain, and generally sales and selling and interacting with people, there's a different side of the brain. So he's wouldn't be too many of him around.
But like what you just said, he's never happy in the moment. Like it's always, so you really rung a bell when he's still fighting right now. Like. I wouldn't never say he's actually ever happy. It's like never is enough. Good on him. Like it's his life. But I was actually getting to something before that, but I can't remember it. But no, that's what I wanted to ask you, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
it's interesting to me how you go, because when you are working at say Osram there, it's there would have came a time where you go, I need to actually let go of the rope or something and start your own thing. So what happened there?
You're dead right, actually, because it was more. It was as much through discontent with what I was doing, and this thing came along, because I ended up making a spring. Lovell Springs in Sydney made a prototype for us to get us going, but it's probably more the fact that I wasn't happy with what I was doing. That there had to be something else. I didn't know. I knew. Always wanted to be an industrial commercial photographer, but my time to do that had gone. And so in a way, you just bite the bullet. I mean, I was, back then I had a fairly good pay. They just granted me a company car, and then I turn around and say thanks, but I'm, so I then go home, and then I'm earning $5,000 in my first year.
Right.
It's just, and I think what it really is you make a decision on, can you let it go or not? And something inside me says, I can't let it go, because I'll then spend too much time wondering. And one of the things I remember at the time was that my boss at the time was a lighting engineer, and he was employed to run the lamp division in Australia for the selling the lamps. But I knew his passion was designing lighting, so they'd do the Sydney Cricket Ground, the flood lighting for that. So they'd go all the big jobs around, they'd quote on those, and they'd design the thing. So I knew that was his passion, and then he was telling me a story one day that a co-worker of his, they were thinking of getting together, leaving Osram, and then forming their own business, and then getting a licensing agreement for the actual housings out of Europe, and then they'd compete and they'd have their own company. And to this day, I think that when I left, there was a bit of a thing between us that I decided to go on my journey, and he probably wished that he could have gone on his, but didn't.
Right.
So
you still see him about?
Sorry?
You still see him about?
He actually ended up dying of cancer some time ago. But it's so I didn't want to die wondering.
Yeah.
But obviously, when you do take the step, you just don't stop paddling. If things get rough, you just got to paddle.
That's what they say.
You've made your commitments. You got to.
Yeah, that's what someone said to me. And hey, I'm not actually there. I feel good right now because I feel like nothing is work. Everything is. Oh no, someone said your job is what you do when I've got to go and do my job. Some work somewhere. But work is what doesn't feel like work. Like you wake up and go, which is probably what you're talking about here. You just only made $5,000, but I can't stop. I cannot stop trying to make this thing successful or better, or it'll never end.
Yeah, wherever you are, there's always some other step you're trying to get to. And
it's good to have interests. Hey, so I know a guy who has no personal interests.